Our guest today, well-dressed Ryan Stanton, is here to tell us about the history of Mozart Park. He earned his master's in social studies from WVU. This is an old list, Ryan. I don't know if you've added anything else, but he's a very avid local historian, and here he is, Ryan Stanton.
Thanks everyone for coming out this afternoon. Just one other thing, since the last time I spoke at Lunch with Books, I was hired as a social studies teacher at Yodeling Park High School. So I kind of took a little day off school here to come and talk to everyone. So thanks again for coming out.
Playing hooky.
And I'll be speaking about Mozart Park. And before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of a background about the person who started Mozart Park. And that was Henry Schmulbach. He was born in 1844 in Germany and immigrated with his parents, two sisters, and grandfather to Wheeling, Virginia in 1852. At a young age, he showed the spirit of an entrepreneur. He helped and worked as a clerk for his uncle, George Feller, in the riverboat industry, his wholesale grocery business, and later on in Feller's wholesale liquor business that Schmulbach would take over in his early 20s. And I will show you, this is from a letterhead from his wholesale liquor business that shows numbers 6 and 8, which was located on Monroe Street, which is today 12th Street in downtown Wheeling. And this is an advertisement from the wholesale liquor business that is from one of the Wheeling city directories that shows some of the things they specialized in. And you'll see Henry Schmulbach and George Feller. And this is a gallon jug from Henry Schmulbach, and this is when he was in the wholesale liquor business. It's probably would have been on display at that shop, and you can see where it says Monroe Street, Wheeling, West Virginia. He also gained interest in various stocks, riverboats, and hotels that cater to river traffic. At age 29, he purchased a home at 2311 Chaplin Street for $3,800 that still stands today. And that is a picture of the house, which you see in the middle. Schmulbach was also very active in the community. In 1876, he donated money to the Hayes and Wheeling Color Guards so they could purchase uniforms and torches. The newspaper article announcing Schmulbach's philanthropy ended with the phrase, "Raw or Schmuley." Although active in the community, he also had a controversial reputation for selling alcohol and for gambling. And in 1878, he was involved in what was called the tragedy on the pike, where after an altercation at a tavern, he struck and killed a man for overriding one of his horses. He was accused of murder, but he was later acquitted. In 1882, Schmulbach became the leading stockholder of the Nail City Brewing Company, and stockholders agreed to change the name to the Schmulbach Brewing Company. After acquiring control of the brewery, he soon expanded it to become one of the largest and most successful breweries in the tri-state area. As he continued to expand his business interests, he was involved in the following ventures: the Wheeling Iron and Nail Company, the Junction Iron and Nail Company, the Atina Iron and Nail Company. He was director of the Top Mill Company, which would later become Wheeling Steel. He was part of the Wheeling Cincinnati Steamboat Company. He was part of the Fairmont Clarksburg Railroad. He was president of the Lime and Cement Company. He was president of the Ohio Valley Fire Insurance Company. He was the stockholder and director of the Hobbs Glass Works. He was director and treasurer of the Washington Hall Association, which would later be known as the Grand Opera House. He was director and then president of the German Bank. He was president, of course, of the Schmulbach Brewing Company, president of the Wheeling Bridge Company, president of the Board of Public Works, president of the National Telephone Company. He owned the Schmulbach Stock Farm on Wheeling Island. He owned the stock farm in Kentucky. He was a member of the school board, and he built the Schmulbach building, which was used for offices and later became the Wheeling Steel building that still stands today on Market Street. And I want to show you a couple images of the brewery that he was president of. This is from one of the early Wheeling newspapers from the late 1880s that shows the brew house. And you can see some of the other buildings. One of them would be Tri-State Machine, and gives you kind of an accurate depiction of what it looked like. And the brew house, the tallest building that you see in that picture with the flag, that is still standing today. And that would later be known as Grubb Construction. This is a letterhead from the Schmulbach Brewing Company, which again shows you a little bit of an idea of what the brewery looked like. And one of the things that you'll see over here is a map of the brewery and outlining all the buildings. And this would have been on 33rd Street in South Wheeling. And then this is a sign from the Schmulbach Brewing Company, something you would have seen just about anywhere on saloons and on street corners in Wheeling and towns throughout the tri-state area. And then this is the Schmulbach building, which he built in 1905 and used as office buildings, which would later be known as the Wheeling Steel building. So that's just an idea of some things that he was involved with. Although he wasn't involved in all of those things at the same time, it gives you an idea that he was a pretty prominent businessman, and he was also involved in a lot of civic-minded, civic-oriented things. One of Schmulbach's proudest accomplishments was the creation and development, though, of Mozart Park that served as a majestic hilltop getaway from the city atmosphere of Wheeling. The idea for Mozart Park started with Henry Schmulbach's vision of a park for the people of South Wheeling. The park would open in 1892, but as early as 1880, Schmulbach offered the north end of Wheeling Island for a park, which he owned and operated as a racetrack. The only park in Ohio County was Hornbrook Park, which was eventually purchased by Wheeling brewery entrepreneur Anton Raymond and would later be known as Wheeling Park. It was argued, though, that the people of South Wheeling did not have a proper park in their own neighborhood, and this is where Schmulbach stepped in to fulfill their dreams. The original site for Mozart Park was called the Frasier Farm and was purchased in 1892 for $13,000. The farm was high atop a hill that overlooked South Wheeling, and at one time had been a large peach orchard. Additional lots were purchased in 1893, which brought the total land purchases to around $17,000. The park's site was also conveniently located near the Schmulbach Brewing Company, which was located on 33rd Street, and the park would serve as an exclusive outlet for Schmulbach beer. During the early stages of the park, there was a lot of construction activity. Workers were busy constructing the main building that was to contain a bar, a billiard room, a bowling alley, reception rooms, a large hall, and toilet rooms. The first official gathering at Mozart Park occurred in July of 1892 and was an exclusive event for members of the Mozart Singing Society, and the group had picnics in the orchards. The park opened to the public in the following year of July of 1893, and its official grand opening occurred on October 25th, 1893. Although the park was an ideal location away from the overcrowding and smells of the city, transportation to the park proved to be very difficult. If you wanted to visit the park, you either had to walk or take a wagon up to the park. That is why in the spring of 1893, construction began on an incline railway, similar to what was already being used in Pittsburgh and in Cincinnati. The base of the incline was located near present-day 43rd Street. With all the construction occurring at the park, it proved to be a very dangerous place. In June of 1893, a stone weighing 1,400 pounds was being elevated onto a sled for use on the incline when it broke loose and crashed down the hillside. It came within 2 feet of Jacob Brown's house. A woman with a baby in her arms was standing near the gate of her home and barely had enough time to move before the stone crashed through a fence and into a coal house. The boulder did not stop until it crashed through yet another fence. Later in June of 1893, stone taken from the quarry near Mozart Park was ruled unfit for use, and stone from a different quarry was secured. In July of 1893, a horse pulling a wagon loaded with brick lost footing near the top of the incline. The horse went over and down the hillside and hit a fence enclosing the park. The wagon was smashed and the horse was injured considerably. On another occasion, a driver was struck by lightning and rendered unconscious for half an hour until he eventually recovered. In that case, the horse was not injured. And a lot of the descriptions that I'll read to you, they're straight from the newspaper. I didn't want to change their language and the way that they reported about it, so kind of note that in some of the things I talk about. Also, in July of 1893, a gang of workmen uncovered a large stone and found a copperhead snake that, quote, sprang at them. The snake was killed and reported as being very thick and nearly 3 feet long. On another occasion, workers killed a black snake. Its length was 6 feet 4 inches. On October 25th, 1893, the grand opening of the Incline Railway occurred. There are disputing numbers as to how much the incline actually cost. Previous historians have noted that it cost about $100,000, but longtime park manager Henry Jacob Buell, who also designed the Mingo Indian statue atop Wheeling Hill, said that it cost $32,000. Nonetheless, at 4:15, members of the board of directors for Mozart Park, invited guests, and the press were ready to be hoisted 940 feet to the top of the hill. Each car could seat 28 people comfortably, but on its maiden voyage, 33 were crowded into the car. Once atop the hill, guests toured the grounds of the park, which at that time contained a building with 4 bowling alleys, a bar room, a dancing pavilion with an elevated section for the orchestra, which had a capacity of 5,000 people, which was the largest dancing pavilion in the state, and gardens with plenty of seating to enjoy the scenic views that the hilltop had to offer. One visitor from Germany said that, quote, no scenery along the Rhine could compare with it. On the second day of operation for the incline, plans did not go so well, though. A crosshead on one of the engines broke, and repairs were not made until late in the day, which forced many visitors to either leave or to make the trek up the hill. By November, though, of 1893, the incline was running smoothly. Cars were run every 2 minutes and could handle 1,200 people every hour. The cost to go up and down the incline was 10 cents, and the incline would remain open until 1907, until the Mozart streetcar line took its place. And I'll show you some pictures. Some of these are from the newspaper. These are drawings of the refreshment hall. This would be a drawing of the dancing pavilion that was in the newspaper. This would be an actual photograph of the dancing pavilion, and the lower photograph would be the casino at Wheeling Park. I believe this was produced in a pamphlet to kind of give an idea of what Wheeling had to offer, and this is the page that showed off the parks. This is a postcard of Mozart Park, and as you can see, it shows off the gravel walkways, and you can kind of see a bench in the shady places where people could have picnics and relax. This is a drawing from the newspaper of the incline, so this is one artist's depiction of what it looked like. And you can see right at the very top of that text, it talks about how the crosshead on the motor broke. This is a photograph of the incline. And notice the hills, there's no trees, it's barren. This is another view from one of the newspapers. It's titled On the Hilltop, which you can see what would have been the refreshment hall and the dancing pavilion. And this is sort of unique. This was it's a small oil painting done, and it's titled The Mozart Incline, 1893. And it's titled The Horse and Buggy Days. And you can see the incline and some of the buildings at the top of the hill, and those at the bottom too, which is kind of a unique view. I'm not sure if that was done in 1893 or if it was done later, but kind of a one-of-a-kind view of Mozart Park. Throughout the first year of the park, animals played a major theme, both intentionally and unintentionally. In the summer of 1893, a black cow had taken up residence at the park. The newspaper reported that he is a sociable fellow and makes up with visitors right along. During the fall of 1893, an uncommonly large black cat made a new home in the Mozart Park engine room. Because the cat was believed to bring good luck, he was reported as being fed very well. In January of 1894, 400 people and 25 dogs went up the incline for a fox hunt. It was reported that the fox was given a 250-yard head start, the dogs were unleashed, and a wheeling hound captured the fox and tore it, quote, limb from limb. A zoo was also planned at the park, and one of the first animals on display was a black bear named Bruin. Bruin had lived in a cage at the park for about a year when it was decided that he was becoming a nuisance and an unnecessary expense. And unfortunately for Bruin, the park's solution was a bear feast. Bruin was slaughtered and frozen, and the park geared for the February feast that was scheduled to take place on George Washington's birthday. Events included games and bowling in the afternoon, and the feast would begin at 5 o'clock in the restaurant. The event was predicted to be, quote, one of the nicest events at the park. The festivities went as planned and were enjoyed by all, but those who had taken part in the bear feast said that Bruin's meat was very tough. Bowling was also one of the park's greatest pleasures, and a very popular sport during that era. South Wheeling even had its own bowling team that was sponsored by Henry Schmulbach, called the Southside Bowling Team. And this is a photograph of the 1893-1894 Southside Bowling Team, and you can see they were champions that year. And if you look at some of the names, you can see, of course, Schmulbach, but you'll notice some other prominent names in Wheeling, such as Spidell, you'll see Mall, Hortzman, and Marshner, which both those gentlemen at one time or another were either vice president or served on the board of directors for the brewing company. On February 20th, 1894, after beating the Intelligencer team in Wheeling, Schmulbach took the team to Gavin's Hotel on Main Street, which specialized in choice wines, liquors, and meals at all hours. Schmulbach paid for all the club's expenses, and the newspaper reported that after the feast, a general good time was had until late in the night. And although this bowling match didn't occur at Mozart Park, it kind of gives you an example of how Schmulbach took a lot of pride in the Southside bowling team and making sure that all those gentlemen had a good time. On another occasion, 25 employees from the Schmulbach Brewing Company went bowling at the park. They split into two teams. It was drivers versus the workmen, and the drivers won and all reported having a pleasant time. Throughout the year of 1894, the parks and grounds continued to be developed and the building expanded, and when it was finished, the park was able to boast the following features: of course, the dancing pavilion, a casino, a restaurant, bowling alleys, an outdoor stage, and a 1/3 long bicycle track. When the bicycle track was being excavated, workers discovered an ancient burial site that contained the skeletons of 2 human beings. It was believed that the site dated back to the time of the mound builders. The skeletons' remains were passed into the hands of park employees, but have since disappeared. During the spring of 1894, the park's closing time was 8 p.m. But after the installation of electric lights, the closing time was changed to 11 p.m. 60 arc lights were installed along with hundreds of incandescent lights that were wired to the Schmulbach Brewing Company, which contained its own power plant. Success and popularity continued with the second season of Mozart Park. One of the season's first major events was a celebration for Decoration Day, which would later be known as Memorial Day. On this special day, the park announced that it would award a silk parasol and umbrella to the best lady and gentleman waltzer. Another major event during the summer of 1894 occurred on July 1st. On this day, Mozart Park entertained students from Wheeling Public Schools. A total of about 4,000 students and parents attended the event, and each group was given a basket lunch. Students played games in the grass, bowled, and danced. One girl, though, who was 14 years of age, had a sunstroke while dancing on the pavilion, but she was later revived by a physician. In November of 1894, Henry Schmulbach attended the park for the evening, and after watching his team bowl a few games, which they lost, Schmulbach decided to leave, but was asked to stop by Mozart Hall. He apparently was under the impression that he was going to be stopping in on a friend's birthday party, but soon realized that the party was to celebrate his own 50th birthday. Speeches were given at the surprise party, and about 60 guests joined in dancing and refreshments throughout the night for Henry Schmulbach's 50th birthday. One of the largest and most controversial events to ever take place at Mozart Park occurred on July 23rd, 1895, and it was called the Centennial Celebration, which was meant to commemorate the formation of the town government of Wheeling. Because this was meant to be such a civic-minded celebration, there were some in Wheeling who frowned upon the idea that this event was going to take place in a beer garden. The main person who led this protest was Dr. Albert Riker of the 4th Street Methodist Church. And this is a photograph of Riker. Dr. Riker led lectures about what he called the evils of society, which included things like alcohol, gambling, theaters, and dancing, among many other topics. One lecture that Riker gave claimed that Wheeling drinkers spent over $4,000 a day, which added up to over $1 million a year. So his theory was that the Wheeling people were spending way too much on alcohol, and they could instead spend that money on more civic-minded and thoughtful things. One of his most well-noted lectures across the East Coast was titled, "What Shall We Do with the Boys?" In Dr. Riker's lecture against this celebration taking place at Mozart Park, he said, quote, "Some say it is not a beer garden. It is a beer garden. It is nothing better. It exists for the sale of beer, and it has no other object." Riker would go on to say that Mozart himself must be turning over in his grave, and that his bones rattle with holy horror because such a place is even named after him. Riker continued by saying that even though cities such as Cincinnati, Chicago, and New York are wicked cities, even they would not hold their city's Centennial Celebration in a beer garden. Riker went on to say that Wheeling was setting up an altar to Gambrinus and declaring him king, and Gambrinus was the king of beer. He closed his sermon by urging people to not to attend the celebration, to think of the children in the Sunday schools of this city. Well, on the day of the celebration, the weather was threatening, but that did not stop the approximately 1,500 people who made their way up to the park for opening celebrations. At about 2 in the afternoon, special guests made their way south from the McClure House to the top of the hill, where they gave animated speeches about the founding and history of Wheeling. In an address given by Dr. Yodeling, he described his journey from Germany and his arrival to Wheeling in 1836 at age 10. He also referred to the great influence exerted by the German citizens of Wheeling and said because of their power, it could be said that Wheeling itself was half German. He went on to eulogize the city, its parks, and its suburban railroads, specifically the Wheeling Park and Elm Grove Railroads, which was started by Germans. He ended his speech by saying that there was some reference was made in a recent pulpit utterance against the holding of the celebration in a beer garden. And he said that although a man might have to pass 25 saloons a day, he need not go in and drink. And in the like manner, he might attend a pleasure ground where beer was sold, among other things, without sacrificing either character or convictions. He goes on to say that the beer element, he said, has done much for Wheeling and could be depended upon to do more in the future despite such uncalled for and unseemly attacks. Well, as the evening approached, attendance at the park increased. At 6 o'clock, streetcars in downtown Wheeling and Benwood were filled to capacity, while a steady stream of pleasure seekers poured into the lower station building of the Incline. By 7 o'clock, the streetcars arriving at 43rd Street were not only crowded, but men could be seen holding on to the cars by every protection. By 9 o'clock in the evening, there were between 8,000 and 9,000 people at Mozart Park. The evening ended with fireworks, and it was long after midnight until the last group descended the incline to go home. These types of events described here would continue throughout the existence of Mozart Park. Groups such as the Mozart and Beethoven singing societies made Mozart Park their home, while other groups and organizations such as post office employees, grocers, and locomotive engineers held events in the park. Operas and vaudeville shows were popularly attended at the park, along with other types of amusements. They even tried to attract performers from Coney Island to Mozart Park. And one time there was an event called a balloon ascension and a parachute jump. Sadly, the balloon failed to hold hot air and ripped, but it was one of those things that was publicized to try to increase attendance. Another major event was the musical production, The Battles of Our Nation, which had scenes from the wars of 1776, 1812, and the Civil War, and had a cast of over 200 people, and was performed on the outdoor stage of Mozart Park. The park continued to prosper, but it took a major hit when Prohibition was passed in West Virginia in 1913 and became official in 1914. Part of the park's entertainment and atmosphere was the beer garden, which was a major part of German heritage and culture, so its closure was a major hit. As Schmulbach was forced to close the brewery on 33rd Street, one can only imagine the stress and anxiety that filled Schmulbach as he had to close an industry that he had made very powerful and productive in Wheeling. 2 years later, in 1915, Henry Schmulbach died, and the park remained open until 1918, although since Schmulbach's death, the park's activity and entertainment gradually dwindled. With the outbreak of World War I and the anti-German sentiment, that did not help matters either for the park. That is when the executors of Henry Schmulbach's estate began selling portions of the park, and that is how the community of Mozart started. And I'll show you a few more pictures here. This was an example of an ad that you would have seen in the newspaper, and for this particular event was a concert by the Mozart Singing Society, Tuesday evening in June, looks like 11th. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you for today, this is a sign from the Schmulbach Brewing Company, and it shows people sitting atop a hillside, having a picnic, and they are drinking Schmulbach beer. And what are they overlooking? They're overlooking the brewery in South Wheeling. I don't know if the park actually extended that far north, if you could have actually really done that in person, but it's kind of a neat view of the atmosphere, the type of people that would have been attending the park, and how they would have been dressed, and of course what they would have been doing and buying. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming out today, and if you have any questions or anything, I'd like to answer them for you. Yes?
Approximately how many acres were in the park at its peak?
At its peak, I've never seen an exact number, but I'm guessing around 150 to possibly 200 acres. Yes?
Ryan, are there any ruins of the park or incline that can be seen today?
There are ruins of the incline. If you look when the leaves are off, if you go on 43rd Street and look up towards that hillside, you can see the stone pillars that the incline would have rested on. So those are still there. From the park itself, though, there's really, not that I know of. It's possible that there could be a few old houses or buildings that have been remodeled or modified where you can't really tell how old they are. That's a possibility. And then, of course, there's the Incline Bar, which, of course, named after the incline. It's possible that before it burned, that one of those buildings may have been original to the park, but I can't confirm that either. In the back?
What was the location of the brewery, Schmulbach?
Okay, the brewery was 33rd Street, and the incline was 43rd Street. And one of the things, like I said, I have on display here is a map of the brewery and what the buildings, what their purposes were, and their dimensions and things like that. Yes?
The caretaker's house is still standing and very well taken care of.
Okay, that's what I've heard of before. So that's one example of something that's still there. And I've even found different newspaper articles about who was caretaker at a certain time and who was even living in that house. So that's good to know that that's still there. Yeah, in the back again?
What was the location of the Gavin Hotel on Main Street you mentioned? Approximately.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I can go look at my speech though, and if I don't have it in there, I do have it somewhere. Yeah. Yes.
Do you know of any other homes that you may have had? My niece bought a home a couple of years ago on number 10 Frasier Farm Road, and her deed takes it back to him.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's why I'm here.
Yeah. He would have. The reason that his name's on there is because he would have owned all that property. The house per se, I don't know if that would have been there. But yeah, on almost everyone's deed that lives in Mozart, if they trace their original deed back, Henry Schmulbach's name is on it, or the Mozart Park Association is on it, or that's where it goes back to. So he would have been. It would have been the Frasier Farm, and then Schmulbach would have owned it. Yes.
You said the park closed around 1918, 1919, but then you gave another date, 1897, and I can't remember what you said that was.
1897. I'm not sure. Maybe I might have misspoken, but the park would have closed 1918 when it officially shut down. Yes.
Was there an admission charge to the park, or was it free to go?
For some of the events, like for the plays and things like that, there would have been admission charges. But basically, it was 10 cents to go up the incline, or once the incline closed, there was a fee to ride the streetcar. But other than that, I've never been able to find like specific admission prices. That's a good question. Yeah.
How would the, you said there was a streetcar, how would that go up to the park?
That went up. Someone that lives in Mozart can maybe help me with this. I think it's Fraser. That's the way it would have wound up around there. Yes.
Okay, 1897, Mozart Street line took its place, and that took away from the incline, I guess.
Yeah, that would be. It was 1907.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
1907.
the incline was still used.
What's that?
The incline was still used at that time.
No, it closed in 1907. Yeah, it closed in 1907, and the Mozart streetcar line took its place. So after 1907, the incline was dismantled and sold to who, I'm not exactly sure, but it was dismantled and taken down. Yes.
Well, I had heard that incline was the one that's used in Pittsburgh now.
I've heard rumors that it was bought by a company in Pittsburgh, and currently parts of it are used up there. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not sure. Yes.
Do you know when the streetcar had an accident? I've heard of somebody with deceased now who was injured in that accident, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I know of at least 2 different accidents that occurred because of how steep it was. I have a picture of one, but I can't confirm that it was actually Mozart Park, which is what it says in the back of the postcard someone wrote. But that's right, it was a pretty dangerous trip to go down that streetcar line because it was so steep. And there was, if I remember correctly, one of the accidents was pretty fatal. I believe one of the drivers of the streetcar was killed. So that could be a dangerous job. Yeah.
What method did they use to calculate how many people participated?
That's a good question too. I'm guessing they had some type of booth or something they would have walked through that counted people. But
Or did they use the incline?
I think they would have used the incline, and once they went through that ticket booth, they would have known how many tickets they sold. So that's kind of, I think, approximately where they get their numbers. If they say there was 1,400 people in the park on Saturday, that's probably because they had 1,400 tickets sold, or something to that effect. That's how they kept track of it. Or they had a gate that they went through that could kind of count as people passed through bars too. So.
But people must have gone there from other locations as well as.
That's true too.
Really.
Yeah, that's possible.
Were there roads to get there in addition to the incline?
Other than, what was it, Frasier? Other than Frasier Run Road, I don't know of any specific other roads that would have taken you there.
It actually had a very short life then, the incline.
Yeah, as unique as it was, it wasn't around all that long. And it's kind of strange because as unique as it was, there's only one photograph that I know of it. And that's the one that I showed you from, I think it's from the Brown collection. And then there's a couple other images from newspapers and the little oil painting that I showed you, but it's, yeah, it wasn't around all that long. Yes?
Until the 1960s, it had a small city park, I guess you could call it, with a waiting pool and a hall for the children, you know, and craft room, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that's all gone, and I think there's one of the
Yeah, it's kind of even, it's hard to imagine that there was even all this up there, I think, sometimes. Yes?
Where is the caretaker's home?
That's a good, where, does anyone know the exact address of the caretaker's home? Because I'm not positive.
It's 10 Frasier Run.
Is it 10?
That's the caretaker's home.
And that's up in Mozart?
That's where my niece lives. You're kidding.
That's what I remember under the impression of someone told me that.
Yes.
Do you plan to publish or write, some memories about Mozart Park?
Yeah, my goal is to one day put together a biography on Henry Schmulbach, and Mozart Park will be a big theme of that book. So. And kind of what I presented today is by no means whatsoever a comprehensive history of the park. There's so many other events and stories that I've been able to dig up about the park. It's almost, I have more information about the park than the brewery, really, when I add everything up. So there's a lot of information that I still have to kind of go through and organize. So, yeah.
What made you select that particular area to research?
I had the history of wheeling class with Dr. Javersack, and I think fall 2006 when I was working on my undergraduate degree at West Liberty. And he was talking about Henry Schmulbach one night, and I just wanted to learn more about him. I ended up writing a research paper on him, and ever since then I've just kind of been hooked on researching and collecting things from the brewery.
Are you initially from Wheeling area?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Which area?
I'm actually from the Dallas Pike area, the Philadelphia area. So not from downtown, but from Ohio County. Yes?
I'm not sure if you mentioned it earlier because I had to arrive late, but did you say anything about hours of operation or the days of operation of the incline? Was it 7 days a week in long hours, or did they close that down early? Or?
Off the top of my head, I forget the year, but at one point they installed electric lights in the park, so the park was open until 11 p.m. most nights. So the incline would have operated. And you have to imagine too, if the park closed at 11, it still took a while to get people off the hill too. So that could be a pretty big short.
But surely they would have been open on work days.
Yeah, there's a lot of events. It's kind of interesting. A lot of the events I found, they might be on like a Thursday night, and you got to imagine like people have to go to work the next day, and they might be up there until midnight sometimes, and they got to come off the hill and kind of imagine what that was like for these guys. Yeah, in the back.
Where was Mr. Schmulbach's residence? Did he have a mansion on the island? Is he big shots live at that time?
He lived on Chaplin Street, 2311 Chaplin Street. And let's see. I can go back and show you that house. But if you're familiar, it's in the historic road district where those Victorian houses are at, not too far from Coleman's Fish Market. Yeah, that is.
Ryan, could you talk a little about Schmulbach's Roney's Point Mansion?
Yes, this is where he lived up until around 1913. 1913, he officially moved out of this house that you see here, and he sold it, and he moved to Roney's Point, where he had built a huge mansion. And later on, it was after Schmulbach's death, it was later acquired by Ohio County, and they used it as a poor farm. Later on, it was used as a TV sanitarium. They also built on that property kind of like a mental hospital or kind of like a halfway house for mostly like alcoholics and things like that. And later on, it was eventually the house burned and was destroyed. There's a few walls and things like that that still survive, but 1913, he moves away from wheeling and kind of retires. That's also when he had to close his brewery and kind of retreats to the country where he could just kind of relax. He had gardens. He had one of the biggest greenhouses in the state, but he would die in 1915. So he was only able to live there for about 2 years. So, yes.
Was he married and had children?
He actually married in 1913 when he moved to Roney's Point. And he married Pauline Birchie, and her family owned the Birchie funeral business. And he was like, I think he was 69 years old, and she was about 42.
So they didn't have children?
They did not have children, no. But what happened was both the Schmulbach sisters had died by 1913, and when he moved to Roney's Point, the theory was that he needed like a hostess in the house, or, at least that's how the story goes. So they were only married for 2 years, didn't have any kids, and she would be the one that would inherit his fortune. She was the one who sold it to the county and so on. Yes.
Curious about the incline. Was that a successful financial business park?
It seems like it would have been. I think so. I mean, in my opinion, it would have been, but as to why they completely dismantled it and did away with it, I'm not sure. That's a good question. Still something that's kind of, I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that. It's a shame that it was taken down because it was such a unique form of transportation to take. That's a good question.
It might have been better transportation in the future after taken down because the streetcar wasn't that safe.
The streetcar wasn't safe, and I mentioned you could fit on the initial voyage of the Incline. They had 33 people that were on that trip, but I have to imagine they crammed as many people onto that thing as they could. You could probably, on one platform, you could probably 40, 50 people maybe would cram onto that. So, yes.
Was it steam powered?
Yes, it would have been steam powered. There was an engine room that controlled everything. Yes.
Curious about what your bottles were they all from the brewery?
Yes. One thing that you can come up and look at is I have a lot of. They're all bottles from the Schmulbach Brewing Company. They're all bottles. Some of them are similar to the one that you see in the sign up there, but they're all bottles that might have been used at Mozart Park or at various taverns and saloons and homes in Wheeling. So there's a huge variety of different bottles that she would find. The other thing, this is an end from a beer case that would have held these pint-sized bottles. And that's just, I have other cases, but that was easy to bring because it's just the one end of it. So, what happened was that the other side of the beer case was rotting, so you couldn't really, it was kind of useless. So a friend of mine cut it up and kind of made it so it looks three-dimensional so you can hang it on the wall. So, yes.
Was the beer and those products, were they called Schmulbach?
Yeah, yeah. I have some bottles that still have the paper labels on them. It would have been Schmulbach Brewing Company, and a lot of times it's phrased with Golden Brew. And you'll even see, like on the back side of one of these bottles, you see Golden Brew. So, and on the labels, it would have said, bottled in Wheeling, West Virginia. And a lot of times in the bottles, it said for family consumption. Yes.
In relation to the incline, I know the Mount Washington incline in New Hampshire, that the upkeep on that is incredible, that they are constantly having to, because of the fact that it is an incline, it has at least about 3 times more stress on it, and they have to do so much work on it constantly. So they probably found that this was very costly in the fact of having to do repairs, and not only just repairs, but maintenance on it.
That's a
the
good
maintenance, it's constant maintenance on an incline, any incline. And I think there's been papers and stuff written on the maintenance and upkeep of the Mount Washington. I don't know about any of the other inclines. That's one that's still in operation. Probably check through that one.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And even on the first day of operation, it broke down. And that was something I found throughout its history, that it would occasionally break down, and if you wanted to go to the park that day, you either stayed home or you walked. So that's a good point too.
Well, I couldn't hear, most of what she was saying, but did it mean that the upkeep and so forth was just too...
Yeah, or all the stress that's put on the incline moving at a steep angle like that. Engines or parts of that incline are bound to break down mechanically.
And did you say you didn't know how the streetcars would get up there? I mean, how did they get up there that in fact then the incline wasn't used anymore? So there must have been some means.
Go out 29th Street, around Magazine Cemetery, and straight up the hill.
Yeah, and I believe they would have been electric. So I don't know power-wise how strong that is, but that's how they would have operated, how they would have went. I think I saw another hand somewhere. Yes?
Last week, Ken Burns, who did the Civil War, he had Prohibition on last week. And just talked about the brewers. If you couldn't diversify, maybe go to another product, how unfortunately you were put out of business for a few years, 13 years, I guess.
Right.
Until the 21st Amendment. So he must have been a victim of the...
Yeah, and he was. And, he asked to close his brewery in 1913, and he only died 2 years later, no children. There was no interest, or there wasn't anyone to take over the brewery and convert it to something else. And all the Wheeling breweries went through that. None of them were able to make a go of it after Prohibition was repealed. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I understand that during Prohibition, you could produce wine if it was for sacramental use.
Yeah. Right, there were a lot of different loopholes, especially because it passed in West Virginia in 1913, but didn't become national until 1919. So, if you wanted to drink a beer, you could go to Ohio. It was kind of hard to enforce, and there were some loopholes like that the brewers and other people could kind of try to take advantage of. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. You have an opportunity to come up and take a look at the map and some of the bottles. Thank you.
Yodeling Dick here to tell you about a happening. Lunch with books. Lunch with books has cooks and cooks and hacks and cracks and yells and sings and rocks and swims and more and more. Much, 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 much more. Lunch with books. At the Ohio County Public Library in Wheeling, West Virginia. It'll make you feel like yodeling. Hey, Lordy, oh, Lordy, oh, Lordy, oh, Lordy, hey, Lordy, oh, Lordy, take away, take away. Mostly on Tuesdays at noon. Bring your lunch, we'll provide the pop. And it's all free. Lunch with books. Knowledge is served.